Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining Automation Hour. Some logistics for today's webinar. All lines will be muted. If you have any questions, you can post them to the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community. And also, we'll be posting its recording on our page afterwards. So if you want to share with anybody, feel free to have them subscribe to our YouTube channel and see the video there. And for resources, we've got the Trailblazer Community Automation Hour group where you can go and talk with other automation experts and people trying to learn automation inside of Salesforce, as well as you can go to our website, automationhour.com. From there, you'll have lots of blogs and past automation hours that you can go see and learn from. So for the remaining 3 sessions of the year, we've got some really great people lined up. And then we are looking for people for next year. We are starting to get those sessions scheduled. So if you have any ideas of what you might want to present, shoot one of us a note and we'll get you in line, find a date that works. But make sure you register for these 3 upcoming ones. They're all going to be awesome. And thank you to our sponsor, Concrete.io, who has been supporting us since the start and lets us do this webinar for free. So here's your co-host, myself, Jennifer, and Rakesh. And here is James. So I'm going to pass it over to James.
Well, great. So thanks, everybody, and appreciate the introduction. So my name is James Goerke. I run a small global support team for a Salesforce partner called Velocity. And I'm a Salesforce MVP. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for a little over 10 years now. And so I'm kind of happy to have an opportunity here to share some knowledge around Flow and Process Builder. And hopefully today the intent really is to show kind of a real life example of where you might, one of the tools that you automate inside of Salesforce for some specific business purposes, and hopefully you'll pick up some concepts here. So let's get into it. So today, what I want to do is we're gonna. I love to start every piece off with some sort of user story, because we all build off of user stories, whether they're formal user stories or informal user stories, or just kind of sort of hey you moments around the proverbial water cooler. We all build off of some user requirement, some user story there. So I like to kind of start off with a fake one that gives us some scenarios to kind of build around. Then we're going to walk through the demo. That'll be the primary purpose of this, and the largest chunk of our time today. And then I'll talk briefly about some homework, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. It could be certainly related to what we talk about today, or they could be kind of anything in nature. So let's dive into that. So let's take a look at our user story. So Durham Donuts. I live in Durham, North Carolina. It's a large donut company that we have here. Then they wholesale donuts. They do a lot of temporary salespeople, and we on and off board these people all the time. And the intent here is to basically make that process for our Salesforce admin. It's a lot of tedious, mistake-prone work, right? And so anytime you hear these kind of key buzzwords in your user stories, takes me a long time, mistake prone, anything in those natures that you hear these keywords, start thinking automation, start thinking getting in the rhythm of taking care of these tasks for your users through automation, so that you can save time and money. And the idea here is we need our requirements is that we need to make it as mistake-proof as possible. So we need to make as few, that usually translates into as few clicks as possible, right? Or as few steps as possible. And then we just need to increase the turnover time for these 100 users that we do on a weekly basis. And so let's kind of dive into it. So I'm going to pop over, and the first thing I want to show you is actually just the actual license assignment process. So if you don't have any managed packages in your org, you may not have ever seen this process. And so it's actually fairly simple. And Salesforce uses that. And and after I show you this process, I'll step in and I'll show you the objects that we're going to work with. And because they're actually really important to kind of take a look at. So I'm on a demo user here, and I'm in setup. And if I want to assign packages, there are really two ways to do this through the user interface. I can scroll all the way down to the bottom here of our individual user, and I can assign licenses. This brings me up to an assign license page. Now, I only have one package in here, so I can just simply click the assign license, but there might be other packages I can assign. So I can do that kind of en masse, but really only for one user. And then I can add my license here, so I can just click add. I'm going to click cancel here, as I want to show you the actual automation portion of this. And the other way is through an installed packages section. And if you come over here to your installed packages section, you will see your all of the packages that are installed. And if your package, there's two types of licensing major type of licensing that partner applications use inside of Salesforce. The first is referred to what's called a site license. And what that means is that it doesn't matter. There's essentially no licensing associated with that package. So as soon as you install the package, all users get access to it, assuming you, as the admin, have assigned profile permissions. The other type is what's referred to as a named license, and that's when you have to actually assign licenses to individual users, and that's done here through the managed license section. Now, here I can kind of come over here, click add users, and now I can select actual multiple users. I only have one demo user in here, but you can select multiple users all at the same time. So there's two methods through the user interface. Multiple users selecting for a single package, or one user selecting multiple potential packages, right? So it kind of gives you two different ways. But both processes are somewhat mistake prone and are somewhat limited in some of the other methods, such as reporting. And I'll go over that right at the end. So if we want to kind of limit this step process, right, and we can even do it during the user creation. So let's go back to our user. The automation that we've set up is rather simple. It's a checkbox. I like checkboxes for simple things, and we just say, hey, look, assign a license to this user, right? And imagine we're setting up this user, and there are 5 or 6 or 10 different packages that we might assign to a particular user. We can have different checkboxes for that for each one, and imagine there's different ones. And I'll go over different pieces. It doesn't have to be a checkbox. I'll go over that during the section where we cover our process builder. Okay. So we'll go ahead and save that. And you'll notice the automation is run because we can actually see that it's assigned a license. All right. When we start building this, any kind of process or any kind of flow, we need to address our data model. And in our license assignment data model, Salesforce handles partner license assignments through a junction object. So let's show you that. So here, so the first piece that we're going to run is we're going to run a query in Workbench here on the package license object. And what this is going to return to us is the Salesforce ID of the actual package that's installed. And you can see that here through the namespace, and that's another piece that's critical to our automation as well in this particular demo. And then the other object that's involved here is called the user package license. Okay, and the user package license is just a junction object. All it does is connect your package right here with your user ID right here, and so you can assign these directly. So this is the cool piece. Now that you have access to an object, you don't have to necessarily automate this stuff. You can actually use Workbench or Data Loader or any of your favorite automation tools to push these things en masse, right? So you know your package ID, that's not going to ever change. And you have your user ID, so you can actually load licenses en masse if you need to. And so you can do the same thing by creating some automation. The point is you're saving time and energy, and you're not going through the user interface to do this stuff where it's mistake prone. You might assign the wrong license to the wrong user, you might assign the wrong package, etc. So in this instance, so now that we kind of understand the object model that we're working with, which is our package license object, which houses our ID for our partner package, and the user package license, which essentially is the junction object that connects our package license ID to our user ID. Now that we understand that model, let's take a look at our flow. So the flow is the first thing that you build when you start building this automation, because it's really going to be the workhorse of everything. We're going to use Process Builder to trigger our flow in this instance, but that's really just the initiator. The flow does most of the work. So let's take a look at our first flow. This is an exceptionally simple flow. There's only 2 steps here, but that's because it's a simple automation. So let's take a look at it. So the first thing we're going to do, actually, hold on, I'm sorry. The first thing we're going to do is set up a couple of variables. And so let's take a look at this variable here. One of the things I like to do as a simple best practice, and I'll point this out now, is anything I like to name things according to their structure, right? So in this instance, we'll put a variable, underscore, and then whatever it happens to be. So by using a good naming structure, you can actually sort things and identify things a little better inside your flows and inside your process builders across the board. So in this instance, this is a variable, and so we're just saying, hey, this variable is a text variable, and we're giving essentially what this means is we're creating an element to store a value, right? That's all we're doing. And then I also need to create a variable for the user ID. And the reason why we know we need to create these variables is because we looked at our package and we looked at our object model, and we said, okay, well, we need a license package ID and a user ID. That's why it's important to understand the data model ahead of time. All right, and then simply put, we'll pop in our user ID. Very simple, same thing, variable user ID. Now we need to do a record lookup. And the reason why we need to do a record lookup is because we need to identify which package we're working with, right? We need to know the ID of the package that we're going to that we need to associate with. Now, in your individual instances, yes, you technically could hard code package IDs, but I don't recommend it. Package IDs might change across environments, and if you ever uninstall it, reinstall it, or push out a new package ID, upgrade might change the package ID's reference. So like there's lots of different pieces here. So the best way to do this is just get the package ID every time. Since the flow is so small in this scenario, right? There's only 2 steps. You really can run a lookup on this. And so what we're building here is a query. And so we're gonna query the package license object, and we're gonna check the namespace prefix. Okay. And in this instance, Salesforce requires all of its partner applications to go through a review process. Part of that review process is the namespace of the package. And that namespace across all the packages has to be unique, right? So we know that we're going to return only a namespace that we're looking for. We know there's only going to be one record returned because we know it has to be a unique value across all of our installed packages. And then so here, we're checking it against the package namespace value. And I guess that I should explain that variable. Hold on. So this, let's go back. So this variable here, we're just saying, hey, this is the namespace variable, and we're just saying it contains the particular name, in this case, velocity. Could be any package, though. Great. So now we know it's going to return our one variable, and then what we're looking for here is we're just going to assign the ID of that package to our earlier variable that we created, variable package license ID. And so now we have one of the two pieces that we need for our license assignment, and we can move there. This user ID field, we actually have both of them. We have both of the pieces we need to create our user package license record. Because from the process builder, we're going to pass in the user ID into this variable. Again, this is why you build your flow first and then your process builder second. So let's take a look at our record lookup, our second element. All right, so this is just adding the actual license. And so again, we're going to create, you can see we're doing a create here on user package license, and we're going to do the two variables. And then we know we need to do these two variables because we take a look at our object model ahead of time. And we're just passing, and we're assigning package license ID to our variable that we assigned in our record lookup. And then we're doing user ID, and then we're passing in the user ID variable. And we're going to get this variable from the process builder, and we'll show you that in just a second. It's fairly simple. This should create one record. All right. So now that we've taken a look at our our flow, we can actually dive in and take a look at our process builder. And we have this set up here. So again, we're going to do this on the user. And in my instance, I've created two steps in my flow for my checkbox, right? One true, one false. And simply put, the false one has a second flow that we've built to remove the license. And it's the same thing. It's very similar in nature to our first flow, so I'm not going to show it. We'll focus on the actual assigning of the flow here. So let's take a look at our elements here are simply, we've done this, conditions equal to true. So if the checkbox is checked, this should trigger. And we're going to launch our flow. And so when you use a flow element in Process Builder, very important to basically pass in the variables you need that you can get from your process. Everything else needs to be looked up through the flow, but if you can pass in something from your Process Builder, then do it. It's a lot easier and it runs a little faster. In this instance, we only need one thing, and so we're passing in our variables. So this is the assigned variable, so variable user ID, and then we're just referencing the actual user ID of the user here. All right, I'm doing one more thing in each one of my steps here, and you can kind of see this. I've removed this. If you're not familiar with the power of one, it's essentially just a concept where you assign a one to a number field. Could be a formula or it could be just a one, an actual number field. And that's specific for reporting. Now, why am I doing this why am I assigning the power of one to a user record here? And so I'm just created a custom field simply on my user to do this. Well, the reason why is because the standard out-of-the-box reporting engine that Salesforce provides us has some limitations. One of those limitations is that you can't run a standard report on the license assignment. Okay, so you can run a report on the actual package to show you like the total licenses assigned, stuff like that, but it won't ever show you who has licenses assigned. And typically you might need to see, okay, individual users in a report, group them by profile, that sort of thing. So to give you more value and to give you the ability to actually assign this stuff, we simply use a power of one. This is now a way you can use this for your filter. You can say if it's one, fantastic, we use it as a filter. And then you can sum it, right? So not only can you use it as a filter in your report, but you can summarize it. So you can say, okay, well, in profile XYZ, there are 10 users assigned, etc. All right, so that's what we're doing there, and you can see the assignment here. So when we have our process and we have it go through. This gives us the ability to then make our process a little less error proof or error prone rather, excuse me, and then allows us to kind of do extra stuff to it, right? And so you can kind of see here we've added in the counter as 1, and that allows us to do our reporting that we wanted to do. So outside of the standard functionality, not only have we've built a simple process builder and a flow that allows us to allows us to make the process less error prone and a little slightly easier to assign licenses, right? It's less steps in the process. I can actually do it right when I'm creating the user as opposed to after the user is created. And then I've given myself more functionality within the system to do reporting on the license counts that we have on partner applications. And you can imagine there are all sorts of other scenarios where you might want to trigger this. So for example, one of the scenarios is you don't always have to do this on like a checkbox. One of the scenarios I see very common in the usage here of license assignment of partner applications like ours is people will trigger they'll essentially go, okay, well, I know that profile XYZ is going to get a license every single time. Doesn't matter. If you have this profile, you get a license. And so that's a very common use case to say, all right, we know it's a profile, perfect. One of the things that if you are going to utilize that particular piece to it, the profile in Process Builder is not assigned immediately to the user. So when you first create the user, it's not available to be used as a filter criteria. It'll essentially error out. But if you create a formula field right here called profile text and utilize this formula as your reference, the process will read the formula and associate it appropriately. So as a little caveat here, if you're thinking about using something other than a checkbox or some other thing that is assigned on the user right away, then kind of use a formula as a workaround. Very common scenario here being the profile. So that's a little fun caveat for everybody. That's what I had to kind of show everybody. I hope you've learned a little bit about how to set up a license assignment flow and process across the board here. And then inside of that, I hope you learned a little bit about setting up flows and process builders across the board and a little guidance there. So let's talk about the homework I have for everybody. So there are 2 very good trail mixes out there. Go with the Flow and Black Belt Process Builder. You can Google these or search the Trailblazer community for any of these. And this is definitely key for learning this stuff so that it becomes second nature to you when you start doing this. And so at this time, I'll take any questions that there are.
All right, let's see if we got some questions.
Not so far. We don't have any questions as of now.
All right, so if you have any questions on what you just saw or something flow related or process builder related, feel free to ask it. It doesn't have to be just for what you just saw.
Quiet group today. There must be a question out there. I see somebody's trying to raise their hand.
Yeah, if it's quicker, you can definitely use the questions inside of GoToWebinar. You don't have to post to the Success community.
I have enabled the question section on the GoToWebinar so they can ask.
I see we've got a few people that have raised their hand. All right, we got a question here. Do you use a similar process to unassign licenses? So how would you go about unassigning licenses if somebody needed to be removed
Yeah, absolutely. But since we have some time, let me show you so I'll pull it up. Let me close this. So it's very similar in process, and so the process here is to simply pull in the same variable, right? So what I've done is in my assignment, so I just say like, look, we're just going to remove the license if the checkbox is false. And so we're same thing. We're passing in the variable user ID into a different flow though. So this is the delete license flow. And I can show you that flow here. Let me just kind of pop into a different flow section. And we'll give flow just a sec to load so I can show it to you. So if you're just going to remove your license, instead of using a create element, you're going to use a delete element. And those are just two elements inside the flow builder here. So same thing on our first step. We're using all the same variables across here. So package license and username, and then the package name is a constant. And then so same thing, we're looking up the package name so that we can, assign that variable accordingly. And again, I recommend you do this because, the package ID might change, and hard coding IDs just in general is not a best practice because typically they may change. Sometimes they don't, but they may change. And so if it's just easier to build your process so that it's kind of error prone in that or error proof in that matter. And then this is just a delete element. So what we're gonna do here in our delete element is look up the user ID here, and then here are our filters, and we're simply deleting the reference here to user ID and package license ID. And so we're finding that reference and deleting it. And so in this instance, I guess you have to know a little bit about the partner package assignment setup. So when you do a delete element, right, you really want these elements in flow to like kind of return, one result, right? That way, it deletes the correct one. And so there's only ever going to be, it errors out if you try to assign, to like the same user ID with the same package license ID twice. So, you really only know there's ever going to be one that's associated there. So that's a piece there that I would, so there's going to be one, but if your scenario is a little different, maybe you're building something for something else and you're trying to delete records and there's going to be multiple ones, you can do fast lookups and loops inside your flow. Those are just elements here to loop through and then continue the delete. So it's going to delete one, then loop through, delete two. So there's different little things you can kind of do with this. So does that answer the question there? I think it was Jen that answered that. Or ask that?
Someone asked on the success community, say that how would you explain this process to assigning multiple licenses?
Sure, yeah. So in my scenario, what you would do is, so this is really built for assigning one license at a time. So you're setting up one user at a time. But if you're going to set up multiple users at the same time, then what you would do is build a, my recommendation would be to build a, you basically build a file, right, of your user information. That's where you typically will receive it. And then you just have a column for your checkbox, right? And so imagine you have like 3 or 4, packages to assign. You just have 3 or 4 different columns for your checkboxes across the board there. And again, the common scenario that I see people use is say, okay, well, certain profiles are going to get certain packages guaranteed, and so you don't even need to worry about assigning multiple licenses all at the same time, because as soon as you create the user, it's going to assign the licenses automatically, and so you would just create users as you normally would. Is there any other questions there, Rakesh?
Yeah, we do have a few other questions.
No, they're not
we have some
in the
from,
success community.
Yeah, we have some questions from the GoToWebinar. So we've got one that says, what were the trails called again? Can you show that slide of what you had for the trails?
Our little homework slide, sure. Let me go back here. Here we go. So this is Go with the Flow is the first one, and then Black Belt Process Builder.
Fantastic, thank you. And this will be posted afterwards, so you'll be able to go click on those or see it through the posting. The slides will be included with the video. So I think we kind of covered this, but I'll just ask the question anyways. Could you use this sort of automation to assign a combination of permission sets and permission set licenses? Is there anything that you would want to add from what you just kind of said?
Yeah, I think you can. I typically, before I answer anything, I love like building it myself, so to make sure it works. And I've never done a permission set assignment with a flow and a process builder, but I think you can. And I think permission sets are assigned. Let's take a look at this really quick. Yeah, so I think permission sets and permission set licenses are assigned via these junction objects. So more or less, So here's our permission set, and so we have like permission set assignments, and I think this is just a junction object. Yeah. So if you take a look at the fields in permission set assignment, you would have assignee ID. That's going to be your user ID, and then your permission set ID. There's your junction object right there. And so yes, in theory, you would just say you could use this sort of automation. You could build a flow just like it, where you would search for the permission set, grab the ID, assign that to a variable, and then use a create or a delete element depending on what you're doing. So you could do that based on profile too, right? So, or you could do it based on all sorts of different things, right? Could be a region, could be, the address or something like that. Whatever is triggering your process. In our instance, it's a checkbox. Those seem to be fairly easy to kind of put in, but you could do it on all sorts of different permissions.
Yeah, I think the only thing probably to think about would be the number of lookups that you would have. There are still, if you're going to have something be triggered through Process Builder, you're still going to hit that 100 query limit on a transaction. So you just have to be mindful of how you're grabbing the different IDs and checking to make sure that you're not trying to assign somebody the same permission set twice.
Definitely. And if you're gonna build a lot of automation in there, right? So like this is something you might do like on a single user, right? You're setting up a single user. So the transaction's likely not to hit, a lot of record lookups. But if you're doing it like en masse, then if you're doing 10 lookups, in a single transaction, and you're loading, 100 users, that's going to error out, right? So in that instance, you need to know, okay, well, I've built all this automation in the background, and I do 10 lookups, and I'm making a large load. Well, in that instance, what I need to do is lower the batch size so that it processes accordingly.
Okay, so we do have another question. Are there any plans of building functionality to restrict the result of, the result set of a fast lookup to a certain number of records? Example, first 10 records. So kind of like with when you're pulling a query here, doing limit 10, or similar to like what you can do in a report.
I have no idea what the what the product roadmap looks like for that. But in our I guess in Flow, let's take a look at the record lookup element here. So it doesn't give us a limit. So I don't think that there's anything here, but you can do a sort. right? And so if your lookup is going to return multiple results, you can sort them, and hopefully that sort will give you and you have to sort it based on a field, but created, date, common one in that scenario, right? So like, maybe you're looking for show me the most recent or show me the oldest or something like that as a sort. And so instead of saying, okay, we'll limit to 10 or something like that, you can sort it, and hopefully it might get there. I don't think there's a way to limit it unless they're missing something. And I'm also not sure what the roadmap might look like. Cool. Any other questions out there?
I don't believe so. Rakesh, do you see anything in the success community? All right, we'll give people just another minute and see if anybody else has any. All right, well, it looks like that's all the questions today. Thank you so much, James, for being the guest presenter today, and the great job you did.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure to kind of speak with everybody today, and thanks for all the great questions at the end. Like I said, I'll post this deck here on the Trailblazer community, and so that you can access those resources anytime. And I think the recording is going to get posted here too, so that should be good. And feel free to reach out to me on social media or otherwise anytime if you have any questions. I'm happy to kind of help out anybody that might need it. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.